Welcome back to the set of The Verdict. Mick Cornett with Kent Myers, and Kent's going to introduce today's guest.
We are very pleased today to welcome back two friends of ours who've both been on the show before, but not together, and that's why we wanted to schedule them again for you to see. On my right is Scott Pruitt, the Republican nominee for Attorney General. Scott did his undergraduate work at Georgetown College, his law work at the University of Tulsa. He was in private practice for a number of years, specializing in constitutional law. In 1998, he was elected to the Oklahoma State Senate and served there with distinction. He now is the co-owner and managing general partner of the Oklahoma City Redhawks. He has a wife and two children joining him in this campaign. On my left is Jim Priest, the Democratic nominee for Attorney General. Did his undergraduate work at Houghton College, did his law work at Syracuse University, where he graduated magna cum laude. He has been in private practice for over 30 years. He's very active in his church, and he is married and has 3 children. Welcome to both you guys.
Thanks,
Welcome
Ken.
back.
Thank you.
Yeah,
Thank you.
we'll start with the typical question, and that is, why did you run? And Jim, you're up first.
Yeah. Well, that's probably the most frequently asked question. I'm sure Scott's gotten this too. It really is something that arose out of my dad saying to me years ago. If you want to be fulfilled in life and have a purpose, find a way to serve people. And so I've tried to do that through my whole life, through scouting as a young boy, and then through the ministry and through my law practice for 30 years. And this is an opportunity to serve the people in an area where they need a strong advocate protecting them, because that's the job of the Attorney General. So I'm hoping this is an opportunity for me to use my 30 years of law practice to serve the people.
Scott?
Well, fundamentally for me, it's about freedom. I've been out of politics for the last several years. As I've been watching the encroachment of Washington in key areas, healthcare obviously is an example that people know a lot about. I believe our liberties and our freedoms are at stake. I believe people realize that, and they realize the Attorney General can do something about it. And I've got a track record as a legislator, as a leader overall, to responding to those kinds of issues, and I will as Attorney General, because I believe people want an advocate. They want a fighter fighting back against Washington, D.C. to protect their interests at this time.
Scott, let me direct this to you, and then I'll direct the same question to Jim. How does your background and experience qualify you to serve as Attorney General?
I think my background is very diverse, and when you have the legal background for 17 years, plus, as you indicated, Kent, in the opening comments, the business background in addition to the legislative leadership, those 3 things, I think, equip me to be an effective advocate on behalf of the people of Oklahoma right now. Who better to enforce and execute the laws as Attorney General than someone's actually drafted those laws as a legislator? Who better to execute and enforce the laws in the state of Oklahoma than a business owner who's lived under those laws, understands how regulation and laws affect how you conduct your business? And as an attorney, in the courtroom, transactional work, a diverse practice focused on constitutional issues historically that I think equip me effectively to represent those interests against Washington today.
Jim, the same question.
Right. Well, I think the most important job of the Attorney General is to be an attorney. And so 30 years of practice representing a broad variety of clients equips me to do that. I've been in the courtroom and tried nearly 100 lawsuits. I'm not sure if Scott's tried any lawsuits, but I think it's important for the Attorney General to know how to keep your client out of court. That's the best advice I always give my clients. Find a way to stay out of court. And if you can't, if you have to go to court, somebody who's been in the courtroom trying cases. I've argued appellate decisions and cases in front of the 10th Circuit, in front of our state Supreme Court, and I think we ought to have an Attorney General who's actually been in the appellate courtroom arguing cases like I have. And I've managed a large law firm. I was part of a large law firm for a number of years. That's what the Attorney General's office is a large law firm. And so I, of course, bring a broad variety of experience as well, not just as a lawyer. I've been involved in the charitable community, been a minister in my church working with marriages and families. I wrote a newspaper column for a number of years called Family Talk, and wrote another one in the Business Journal Record business newspaper called On Ethics. And I've taught and spoken to groups all across the state about the importance of ethics. Rooting out political corruption is an important part of the Attorney General as well. So to protect the people, I think I've done that for 30 years. I've done it for all kinds of clients and worked with all kinds of state agencies. I think that equips me best to be the Attorney General.
Jim, as you campaign around the state, you're meeting lots of potential voters. What are they telling you are the issues, and how do you respond?
All right. Well, I start many of my talks by saying, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, because I've said that well, like I said, nearly 100 times in courtrooms across the state. And on November 2nd, they will be jurors. They will vote on the evidence. And so they tell me they're witnesses now to what's going on, and they'll be jurors later on. What I'm hearing most often from people, number one, of course, is concern about the economy. What's going to happen in the state and in the country, and are jobs safe, and that sort of thing. Close behind that are the things that impact the economy, like methamphetamine addiction and prescription drug abuse. And I've been talking about that throughout. We have a law enforcement advisory panel that I've asked to come together, chaired by Pat Ryan, former U.S. attorney who prosecuted Timothy McVeigh, to tell me what's going on in the field. And the number one problem that I hear from both citizens and law enforcement is methamphetamine. It drives about 80% of our crime. And then close behind that is the water issue. Water's the new oil for Oklahoma. And we've got to make sure that our water is both clean and that it's not sold prematurely before we know what our own needs are and to the wrong people. So those are I'd say the main things that I'm hearing from folks.
Scott, you've traveled in the state and campaigning too. What are you hearing?
For quite some time, and I'm hearing consistently that people are concerned with respect to the methamphetamine issue as an example, the impact of immigration or lack thereof as far as the federal government coming in and enforcing and securing the border. The drug cartels, the drug trafficking that we see coming north of the border in Oklahoma, the Fed's irresponsibility is affecting that and actually contributing to that. You talk to law enforcement in southeast Oklahoma, they will tell you that the meth problem, because we're not enforcing our border, we're also seeing an increase in meth and meth trafficking. But beyond that, I think people's freedoms, I think people's liberties, this health care legislation that passed earlier this year, for the first time I think people are awakened to the fact that the federal government's on the march, that they're trying to restate the balance between the federal and state government. They believe their freedoms from a business perspective and an individual perspective are at risk. They know that the Attorney General can do something about it, and they know that I will. And so the issues that they see from a constitutional perspective, in addition to these issues of criminal justice on meth, I think are the issues that I see consistently.
Scott, let me stay with you and ask you the question. I'll then ask the same question to Jim. How can the Attorney General in that official position combat crime in Oklahoma? And if he or she can, in this case a he, what would you do?
I mean, I think it's a priority. When you look at, the AG is not a super DA. I think, number one, the AG needs to coordinate and cooperate with local DAs, listen to them on how better we can do the job effectively as a team and as a focus of the office. I think the other issue, Kent, is personnel and priority. On the death penalty as an example, the AG last week sought a lifting of the stay. In this case recently, the Smart case, trying to say, let's push this along because justice delayed is justice denied. And so I think the Attorney General can focus on the priorities of the office, both in the death penalty cases, working with DAs locally, and then using the multi-county grand jury in an effective way, perhaps with meth, to say, you know, we see some trafficking from county to county. Let's use that to effectively combat the meth trafficking with the multi-county grand jury. So I think it's a matter of priority and focus, and then coordination with the local DAs.
Jim?
Well, I'd agree with at least part of what Scott's talking about. I think it is prioritization. When we've got a slim state budget right now, we've got to make sure we're doing the most important things first. Scott talks about creating an office of federalism to fight the federal government. I want to create a cybercrime unit to fight cybercrime, to make sure that we don't have victims of scams on the internet, sexual predators on the internet. And so we've got to prioritize what fights do we want to fight. And I think the most dangerous situation facing us comes from the criminal element, the drug cartels. The Attorney General is the point person. He is on the Oklahoma District Attorney Advisory Council. He works very closely with the DAs, and I've talked with lots and lots of DAs across the state, as well as law enforcement officials, about what can we do. And one of the things that they tell me is, we want you to speak up more about these issues, about the crime issues, and make sure that you're using the bully pulpit, be the spokesperson for law enforcement. And one of the other things I've talked to them about is trying to help them with grants, to help grant writing through the Attorney General's office for local law enforcement, because we've got law enforcement agencies that don't have a car, that don't have sufficient flashlights, and we can't expect people to fight crime if we don't equip them well.
Jim Priest and Scott Pruitt are running for the state Attorney General. Kit and I will be back with them right after this.